All right. So, welcome everybody to another episode of the Bench Doctor. It's Tuesday night. That means that we get to watch Scott hit guns with hammers. Tonight, we're doing a history lesson. And what you see on the screen is a Luger P08, I believe is the designation. One of the original 9mm, as we know them, 9mm Parabellum, not 9mm Makarov or anything else. And Scott's going to dive into the guts of it. If you've not been to one of these before, the best way to ask questions is in the live Zoom chat. We are live streaming on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and our Facebook members only section. We can't live stream to YouTube because they do not allow live handling of firearms on the screen, and they get really cranky about that. So it'll be available on YouTube sometime tonight, tomorrow, the next day. So if you missed it, that's how you go find it. Otherwise, if you got questions, put them in the Zoom chat. If you're on our Discord server, which you might be, you can go ahead and put them in the live stream channel there. Again, it's members only, so the best way to find out about this stuff is to go ahead and go to membership.theliberalgunclub.com, sign up as a member. It's $10 for the year, and then sign up for the event. And it's free to members, and then you can come and ask your questions directly in the chat on the evening of. I think that covers everything. Did I miss anything, Kyle?
I'm going to throw the Discord in the Zoom chat right now for those who would like to join, and then we can do it at the end as well.
Outstanding. In that case, I'm going to go right over to Scott and go ahead and get started.
All right. Well, this is one of the oddball guns of lost to history, this design, but it's been around since 1908. The Germans used them in World War I and produced them through the end of World War II. And then after the war, a lot of them were assembled from just parts that were still left around the factories. They were made by different manufacturers. And in the interwar period, a lot of the 9mm Parabellums were rechambered for a 9mm, a different caliber, 7.65. I can't remember what it was, but it's an odd, and they rechambered them because the 9mm was considered a military caliber, and Germany was restricted on the weapons that they could own. So, but this is an actual World War II production Luger. It's a 9mm Luger. It takes 9mm Parabellum, and I'm going to kind of go into how to take one apart to field strip it, clean it, and then kind of point out, if you're in the market for buying one of these, the kind of things you need to look out for, because these are often cobbled together and mismatched, and a numbers matching gun is highly preferable over a non-numbers matching gun. And I'm going to show you where the numbers are on these things, so you can at least have some understanding. So once again, this is unloaded. You can see that the chamber flag is in the chamber. Magazine well is empty. And what's interesting about these guns is we're used to modern guns where the whole top of the gun slides back and strips off a round and shoves it into the chamber, fires, and that's the action. This uses this knee, kind of this, I don't know what else to call it, but the recoil sends this back and it flexes, strips off a round, and then goes forward again. So this is constantly moving up and down as you're firing the gun. Back here, you have your rear sight and then your front sight. And it's kind of funny to be shooting this and watching that action flip up and down in front of your face. It's a pretty accurate gun once you get used to the look and feel of it, but it's just really interesting. There was another C96 gun that used that same action prior to this, but this is probably the most well known. And this was an obsolete design by World War II, and they had switched over to the P38, which we talked about in another video. And the P38 is a much more modern design with the upper that slides back and forth like a modern firearm. But this one, you can see right here, is usually they're stamped with the number. This is 41. This is the year that it was manufactured. Right here, S42 is a code for the Mauser factory. And this toggle here does not match this gun. This should have been just a straight 42 instead of having the S on it. The S was on earlier guns. So this toggle is not original to this gun. It works just fine, but this isn't a numbers matching gun. You can see the serial number is here on the barrel right here, and it's here on the frame as well. So the barrel and the frame match. Here's the serial number here as well. Down here you see 71, which is the last two of the serial number. And a lot of these external pieces are numbers match 71. But if you look at the safety right here, this is number 69, so it's not original to this gun. But one thing, I knew this wasn't a numbers matching gun when I bought it. And the giveaway, they didn't say it wasn't numbers matching, but some of the clues are, if you look at the font on the serial number, it's slightly different. The 7 is straight here, and it's got a little bit of a bow in the back here. So that tells me it was struck by a different die than here. So I just assumed that this wasn't original to the gun. That, and then it's got an Imperial German stamp in it right here, which would have not been on a gun from 1941. These stamps are called Waffenamts, and these are from the war period, 655. One is for the firing proof to verify that the firing pressure, that the gun fired properly. One is acceptance to the military, and I believe the third one, I could be mistaken, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but it was accepted by the Waffen SS, and so and they kind of got what was left over. So that's what these three Waffenamts are. These are German military proofs. There's also one on the barrel right here. So most of this gun is original, but somebody has replaced parts in it and tried to fool people by using parts with the correct final two digits, but the font is different. So that was kind of a key to me that I wasn't going to pay the price of a numbers matching gun for this thing. If the safety had been up, you'd have known right away with the 6.9 here that didn't match. These two pieces weren't, or this piece wouldn't have been original. But anyway, right here it says it's stamped in here. A lot of people have gone back and color filled this with white paint. You'll see a lot of these. I don't think they were actually painted white in the beginning. And the military guns, I don't think were. Some of the commercial guns and guns prior to this era, you'll see a straw color on some of these parts. It's kind of a yellowish, it's kind of a heat treatment, but it's a faint yellowish tan color. On a commercial gun, those parts should be that straw color. On a military gun, you won't see it. They didn't use that finish. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and take this apart. Some people say you have to have the magazine in and the action locked back to take it apart. I found that it works like a modern Glock. You don't really need to do that. You can just take your hand like you would on a modern Glock and slide it back just slightly like that. So I don't know if you can see it, but I'm moving the slide back just a little bit. You flip this little switch down and let it go. Then this little plate comes off. And let's work it off like that. Set it aside. This plate has a number on it right here, but it also, like I said, it has the it doesn't have a Waffenamt on there. It's got the Imperial German stamp. So this is from an earlier gun. So I'm going to set that aside. And then from here, you can now slide your upper straight off the gun like so. And then you can lift this up. This is your kneeing action I was talking about. And this is your bolt face. From here, you can just poke this little pin out. It only goes in one way. Just kind of push that through, and you can slide your toggle out like so. Now in the toggle, you'll see there's a stamp right here. This is 70. So this is an original, this front piece on this gun. And this S40, this is number 71. But like I said, the S is from an earlier gun. They didn't use this at the time that this would have been about a 1938 slide. And they produced this. They didn't want the Allied powers to know that they were producing, where they were producing this. So this was a code for the Mauser factory. So this is as far as I've taken this apart. I don't want to get into, really, there's no reason to take it apart any further for me because everything works. Here's your firing pin and your extractor. And, I cleaned it and greased it and fired the gun and it worked fine. So I didn't see any reason to go any further, but these parts are available. You can buy the firing pins and the springs. There's quite a bit of material still available for these. You can see here, this has got another number on it, 20. So not much of this upper part of the gun matches, but if you can take it apart to this point, you'll see here, 71 and 71. These pieces, this is the same serial number as the frame and the barrel. And then this piece matches. And then if you want to know if this piece is good or not, you get it to this point, and if you just tap it on something metal, it will act like a tuning fork. If you hear that sound of a tuning fork, there's no cracks in this piece. But if it's got a dull thud to it, then there's a crack somewhere in here, and you don't want to buy this gun. This one sounds, it has a nice ring to it, so this is perfectly fine. So anyway, and then from here, you can take your grips off, and these are just held on each side by one screw. These are replacement grips. The ones I have were all of the checkering was worn off, and it's worn smooth. And I took them off and saved them. I didn't want them to get damaged. That's your takedown lever. So I just put these on there for shooting the gun. The originals will always kind of stay with it, but these, when I got them, I had to kind of custom fit them with some sanding and a little bit of filing to get them to fit. They were a little bit oversized, but this is what the inside looks like. Here's your safety. This comes up and blocks it. You can see right here, this piece, this is part of the trigger. This slides right out, and there's a little spring under here, but this is number 69, and that matches this safety. So these aren't original to this gun. And there's a little spring here that this popped out on me the first time I used the gun, and it fits into a little slot on this magazine release. And it provides the tension for that magazine release. So you might want to keep an eye on that. I don't know if it shows it, but it fits down in a little slot here. And then there's a little dimple that fits into a little groove right here. And that's how that goes back together. But this is what the frame looks like. You can see here that the frame, this is where the frame is stamped with the serial number that matches the barrel and the upper. So this is as far as I take it apart. If I needed to replace this spring, I'd have to research on how to do that. It doesn't look like a lot of fun to me. My experience with loading up springs like this has been less than fun. So I haven't taken that out yet, but I have taken the trigger out, and it just slides straight out. You see this little pin right here, and it just slides straight out. And then fitting this little spring into the little pocket right there is, as you fit it back in, you kind of have to push down on it, and it will clip into space. Anyway, any questions on taking this thing apart, or we just continue?
Nothing
on?
yet.
Okay.
Nope.
So that's pretty much as far as I've taken this gun apart. This is the little takedown lever. You can see here the stamp on that. And this is what I was saying. I don't know if it's coming through very well. But
bring it down a little bit into the camera. No, down towards the. There you go.
You can see the 7-1 on here is correct in that it's the last two of the serial number, but the 7 is different. This has a straight back on the 7, and this one has a little bit more of an artistic swoop to the 7. So I just assumed that this wasn't original. I can't imagine why they would use two different dies to strike these parts. Because my understanding was that as they built these, they would find all the parts that worked to the gun, and then they would stamp everything at one time and put the gun together and send it out. So it didn't make sense that the font would be different. So you might want to keep an eye out on stuff like that. So to reassemble one of these, this piece goes back in. This just keeps falling back out. So sometimes I don't put it in there right away. But this just slides back in like so.
Then you kind of down in the frame. We can't see the back. There we go.
Yeah, so you kind of have to flex it a little bit to get this pin back in. And it has a little bit of a lip on this pin right here on the one side, which is on the left side of the gun. That's the side it goes into. So you kind of have to just move it into the right orientation. And then it drops down like that. So that upper's reassembled. As you reassemble this little hook, this trailing hook on the back needs to lock in. And it's nice to take one of the grips off to be able to see this, but you want it to come in here and hook into these little hooks on this piece here. If it doesn't, then it's not, it won't work properly. So you kind of slide it in like so, and then down here, I'm going to have to show you as I get it in place. Let's see if I can. It's kind of a weird angle for me. So I want it to come back. Let's see here. Take it off line here real quick so I can see what I'm doing. Just out of my way. So I want this to see it drop right. Yeah, let's see if I can get this on the camera here. Right there. So I want this little arm right here to catch on these two little hooks. So I want this to drop right into that space like that. And then as I come back, you'll see it down here that it's in the right orientation right here. So I want it to be in that spot right there like that. You'll see the little indentation. So that's what I want to see because it needs to grab that hook. So once that's there, I want to put my little arm back in place. And then this little plate that kind of is the takedown plate, this little hook or this little arm right here drops into this space on the trigger. And then there's a little edge right here that slides up under right here. So it kind of goes in like this, fits into place. And then now I have to kind of hold the gun back like in that same Glock takedown. You put a little backward pressure on it, slip that into place. And so now it's back together. So it's not a hard gun to take apart, at least to this point. Taking it down any further, I would suggest you do it cautiously because parts are going to be expensive. They're available, but they're going to be expensive if you lose one or break one. And if you do replace grips, expect to fit them. Get a little bit of a file and some sandpaper. So right here, if I can show this, you can see where that little arm is hooked into that piece on the frame. That's what I was trying to show earlier. If that's not correct, then the gun won't go back together. It won't function properly. So
that mainspring that was all sort of bunched up,
that's normal. It's there's a lot of tension in there. And like I said, I haven't taken that out. And I don't really want to, based on the amount of tension on that thing. I would if I had to, if the gun didn't function properly or there was something broken in there, I would be forced to do it, but I'm not going to do it just now. So anyway, that's it. This back here is for a stock that went on some of these. I don't know. They all seem to have this, but not all of them were issued with the wood stock. I think more of the artillery, the longer barreled ones. This is just a standard one. The artillery barrel is like an 8-inch barrel. This is 4-inch. So the artillery ones are a little bit different, and some of them came with the wooden stock, but this one didn't. So from there, this is the working action of it. This is the magazine for these. These magazines are still available. The original ones with this Bakelite base on it, and some of them had wooden base plates on them, are getting expensive to find, but Mech-Gar still reproduces these. And I have a Mech-Gar magazine, and I have this original. And I tend to run it more with the Mech-Gar just because it's replaceable. I don't want to damage this, but it works great with both of them. So I'm lucky to be able to get a replacement magazine for it. This just slips in there, and then it has a last round hold open with the magazine in. With the magazine out, it doesn't stay up. This knuckle doesn't stay up, but so that's pretty much it for a P08 Luger. It's a pretty straightforward. It looks like it would be a super complicated gun, but it really isn't. It's pretty straightforward. If you were to load it, you would have a full magazine, put it in place, and then it would strip a round off. So you would flip that back, and it would drop into place just like that. And then your safety would, of course, have to be down to fire. And it's got a really awful trigger. It's just a lot of take-up on it, or a lot of stacking, I guess is the word I'm looking for. It's not the most crisp, clean trigger in the world, but it is fun to shoot. It really is a kick. If you're out.
Why does the trigger capture your whole finger like that? That goes all the way around, doesn't it? Look at the front part of it.
Oh, this piece?
Yes, sir.
I don't know. I don't know why that is that way. I don't know why they made it that way, but it's not anything like a 1911 trigger. Maybe that's why they lost the war. The trigger was so bad on the Lugers. The P38 it has a nice trigger. The gun that came after this is a much nicer trigger than this thing.
There are a couple of questions here, Scott.
Okay.
Because you don't have a slide reciprocating, is there little felt recoil compared to other?
You still feel the recoil. I don't think there's much difference. You still have a lot of mass moving back and forth. This mass is still reciprocating up and down. The whole top of the gun isn't, but this still kind of. I didn't really notice a huge difference in recoil impulse over a standard 9mm, to be honest. Of course, I haven't shot it a whole lot, maybe 100 rounds through it.
Okay, you were talking about Bakelite for the magazine. Were the original panels on their Bakelite, or did those come wood?
These were wood, and then later production guns in 1942 and on, some of them had a black Bakelite grip. They're called Black Widow guns because everything was black on them. And this would have been a black Bakelite instead. This, I don't know if you can see it, but this is kind of a maroon or dark brown. But some of them from the Mauser factory in 1942 had black Bakelite grips, but I think most of them were a wood like this. I have seen some with a white, kind of like a stag look to them, but I don't know if they're original or not. I'm not really an expert on these things. I read up a lot on them before I bought one so that I would have some knowledge, but I'm by no means an expert on them.
Do you know what the prices are since you just you just mentioned purchasing one? Do you know what the prices run for a mediocre example to a high-end one?
800 to 1,000 for a non-numbers matching, but a shooter. 1,000 up to 2,000 for a numbers matching gun, and then some really, extremely nice examples of them. They're up in $3,000 or $4,000 range. And there's a guy, Liberty Collectors, I think, specializes in these things, and he's done a lot of YouTube videos on these guns and can provide you with a ton of information about grading them and determining the authenticity of them. And so I watched a lot of his stuff before I bought one so I didn't want to overpay. I just wanted a shooter. I didn't want a gun that was worth $3,000 or $4,000 that I didn't want to take out and shoot. I wanted something that looked nice, that looked right, but that I could shoot and enjoy. So I paid about $1,000 for this thing.
I don't have any additional questions.
Okay. Well, short and sweet this week, I guess. This just isn't that complicated of a gun. It looks like it would be. It looks like it would be a real interesting thing, but it isn't. It's just see here, this little spring is sliding out. I got to always keep an eye on that thing. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward gun, at least to field strip. I don't know to what extent the people that were issued these field strip them. I would assume they took this plate off and took this this assembly out to be able to clean the thing. But beyond that, I don't know what else you'd really take off of one of them for standard care and maintenance.
Well, it sounds like we're going to be able to end early tonight.
I think so. Unless there's anything anybody else wants to know about this particular gun.
If you like questions, I'm going to go with no.
No? All right.
No, that's okay. I love when you take old guns apart, and you didn't use a hammer a single time.
I did not. Maybe I should, just to appease Ed.
You just put it in the frame. There you go. It's in the frame.
Tap that spring back in place or something.
There you go. Tap the spring back in place. So since there are no more questions, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Next week, we're taking the week off. I don't think we've had a day off since around the holidays, maybe.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of personal inquiries about getting an FFL. So at some point, I might talk through that, kind of show the paperwork.
Oh, let's do a panel. We'll do a Q&A.
Yeah, because I have all of the paperwork and all of the forms and things that I went through, so I can at least talk through my experience of doing it.
We'll do that the week after next. But next week, we got the week off because I'm tired and I don't want to sit in front of the computer every Tuesday night and
fair enough
stream to you people.
There's one other question on this, Luger, before we get too far away here. What would you recommend for cleaning and lube?
I just used a really light gun grease by Lucas, and then I used Lucas oil. That's just what I have a lot of. And then I just use Hoppies and a bore brush because there was some copper fouling in the barrel. So I used a bore brush and then cotton patches. And I wouldn't, on something like this that's this old and the finish is still reasonably good on this thing, I didn't use any kind of a steel brush or anything like that. I just used soft cleaning products with the exception of the barrel. And just modern gun solvents and lubricants seem to work just fine on this. I don't think these require a heck of a lot of lubrication, but there is a lot of moving mass here. So there's a pin that goes through here, and there's a hinge joint right here that I put a little bit of oil on. Anywhere where there was a pin that rotated or anything that flexed like that, I put oil on it, as much of a preservative as a lubricant. And then I put a little bit of grease on the inner rails where this bolt reciprocates back and forth in there. There's a couple of little channels, like a modern gun, little rails. And I put grease in there because that's just what I've always done. with guns with those types of mechanisms in them.
Any other questions, Kyle?
There's one about grease and elaborating on using that versus oil, but we can talk about that in pub chat afterwards.
Yeah, we got lots of things about grease versus oil. Scott, you might as well say like 1 5-second thing on there. And then I want you to bring the back of that gun down in the frame so we can see the whole mechanism, because the back end of it ends up being at the top. No. Top where there we go. Thank you. Now can you show the whole mechanism up in the camera like you were doing earlier? There we go. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what it looks like when it's locked back after you fired your last round. My rule on grease and oil is anything where metal rubs, I use a thin coat of grease. Everything else gets oil. And I oil springs as much of a rust more as a rust inhibitor than anything else. I don't want rust forming on these old guns, so I make sure they have a little fine coat of oil. And sometimes I'll use some canned air to blow it around to get it into all of the tight spaces that I may not be able to get with an oil bottle. But I liberally cover old guns with a fair bit of oil, because I don't want them to get rusty, or because of the finish is worn on a lot of these things, which the original finish would inhibit rust, but where it's worn, it may still rust. So I just make sure it has a thin coat of oil.
Excellent. I have nothing else.
Outstanding.
All
right. So Scott, thank you for showing that wonderful pistol. We're going to do some more of these sort of historical things at some point in the not too distant future. We're going to figure out what our schedule looks like. Maybe we're going to do an FFL thing. It sounds like a good idea, actually, in a couple of weeks. But next week we are off.
Yay.
Well-deserved break. Folks, join the club. Head out to membership.delivergunclub.com. If you're not a member, go ahead and join. It's $10. It's not that hard. Then you too can come and heckle Scott live.
Yes.
Otherwise, I guess we'll see everybody in our Discord server. Kyle's dropped it into the chat in Zoom. If you're a member, you know how to get there, because there should be an email that told you how to get there. If you're not a member, consider becoming one. I'm only going to say that like 3 or 4 more times, I think.
All right. Well, I will see you all in the chat shortly. And
then good night, good luck.
All right. Goodbye.